I'm bringing Timo up and Antonio up, and looks like we're going to have just a really organic call today. Just some time to take a pause on our crazy days and really think and talk about the Regen Registry and Ledger. To think about like refi projects coming in and what how they're going to use the functionality that exists and will exist. So thinking about like project life cycles and use cases, what the big questions are for a lot of these projects that you all might have or be aware of. So I'd love for everybody to just have questions moving and know that we're going to have Ryan from the Ledger team join, and we might have Sarah Bax on ecosystems join towards the end. So a good amount of region voices tapping in. But as always, we want to create space for a lot of other input and voices as well, because we know that we're in the weeds a lot of times. So I'm glad that we can take a pause to hear some other voices. So I thought I'd start out by I really like making these spaces feel a little more human. So wanting to say like, hey to the world, I'm Becca from R&D. I came into Regen managing the land steward program, working with land stewards across the world on carbon plus grasslands. And I'm in East Tennessee, and one of my favorite things to do is swim in these gorgeous mountain rivers we have up here. So, second Sev on listening to all of the birds that are moving wherever you may live. But that's me. And the things that I really pay attention to and am aware of in this space are the people on the ground, the producers and communities on the ground. And what we often see in this space is that we have a lot of demand and not a lot of supply, but we don't want to bring just any supply. We want to go about bringing and originating supply in a way that aligns with our values and ethics, which are, you know, accessibility and innovation and equitable systems. So I think being able to touch on some things today around like seed funding and resourcing and how we're building community, like those things that we really just want to do differently. So for starters, I think it'd be great to have some space for anybody who's here that has like some use cases. Like Will Masters, I see you. Like you're rocking on some use cases. Timo, I know you've got some things rolling as well. And kind of like what's on your mind related to like originating projects and kind of like project life cycles on Regen Registry and Ledger. Love to hear from you guys.
So,
Yeah, go for it, Sam. What's up?
okay, cool. Yeah. Would love to hear from Will and the work that he's doing with the Ogallala aquifer. But what right now at Ecolabs, we've in this process of doing a lot of customer discovery and trying to interview people and understand the exactly what you just described, this on the ground situation for regenerators. And we have been able to connect with quite a number of folks who are ready to do pilot projects and get to work transitioning over to regenerative practices. So one in particular, he's a guy in Zambia. He runs the Zambia Institute of Agriculture, and he's been teaching people how to switch over to regenerative agriculture for the last 16 years, he said. And he has a network of farmers that he works with, and was able to get pretty clear with us on what the sort of dollar amounts it takes for him to take somebody through a 3-year process of transitioning over to regenerative, and what the process looks like, what the cost looks like. And came away from that conversation looking at wanting to raise some funds to take a cohort through and try to prepare for the new season starting in planting season in November for him. And so wanting to see like uh, for us what we're looking at is verifying practices over outcomes and just looking at how can we kind of simplify this the process of just making sure that people are doing the right things. And I think that's what a lot of the different methodologies that are being and like practice based methodologies being built in Regen are all about. And we're wondering what the path looks like for um, eventually being able to create eco credits out of the work that somebody like this is doing, um, where it's more so rather than following a more I guess I don't want to say I've struggled to find the wording around it, but like
Like
rigorous and
conventional, or yeah, like what?
conventional, yeah,
Okay, cool.
conventional methodologies, right, where these things just don't um, feasibly work for a lot of situations for these folks, and just seeing like, is it possible to um, eh, understanding that the quality of data and information that you're gathering might not be as great and as in depth, but just saying this is someone is doing the right things, and we're just going to be able to compensate that person for doing the right things, even if it's maybe not as much as you would get for measuring the exact amount of carbon sequestered or something like that, and allowing someone to be able to capture that and self-verify with just a smartphone, and whether that's possible or not. And that's kind of what we're trying to figure out. So yeah,
Totally.
I I guess to put it into a question, like what um, from what I understand, this process of you know creating a methodology for an eco credit and a credit class is kind of open and decentralized to the communities that want to structure that. And so I guess at a high level, like is that something that's possible, and what would that maybe look like?
Totally. Nice. Well, I like it's like part reflection, part question. And I invite others to reply too. The way that I see it is the question is less centered on is it possible and more on what is the market for it. We're seeing a lot of different examples of what participatory verification or alternative verification approaches could be, and there's so much demand. Just in the past few months, when we've really started to socialize the environmental stewardship approach more, there's been really a groundswell of interest from producers to um, just activated folks in the community. And I think that's because we all get it. We all get that, yes, that's actually what we're trying to do instead of expending carbon to measure carbon. But the market is still quite unknown. We have the benefit within Regen to not just be on the corporate end of the marketplace, but to obviously be in a crypto space where the like innovation is championed in so many ways. So I think that we have more room to play around, but what we also have to do is level set with anyone who is interested in pursuing practice-based methodologies and knowing that like, hey, we think that this is going to go places, but we don't have any guarantee yet on what sort of market there could be. And so the this moment that we're in is very much like a collaboration and exploration and reaching out to what potential buyers could there be, like where are you, like Patagonia and North Face and like all these other folks that really do like latch on to impact. So I think that's the moment that we're in. Like for example, we have a partner that's in southern India, and they have really narrowed in on what like a community verification approach could be, and it's lean and it's effective and it seems to be checking the boxes with enough scientific rigor, and certainly as support to the community. But then, who's going to buy that once it's packaged up? So that's where we would really invite a lot of input and collaboration is on that market piece for sure. And I know that like it's something that we've talked about with others. So if anybody wants to pipe in, please. Um,
On this market for this, something else that Ecolabs is working on and have been helping helping people go carbon negative through this approach is a portfolio approach. So like we call it an eco index, and say instead of just choosing one method of going carbon negative like offsets, just having a basket approach and splitting funds and contributions into a number of different places. And this is another way of funding these activities that we've been looking at, is like allocating a percentage of that portfolio towards practice-based methodologies. And so someone on the market on the other end is just looking at going carbon negative for a certain dollar amount per ton, but a portion of that is then going into these practice-based um, methods.
totally.
And so that's I think this is an interesting thing that I think could be fleshed out further in the space, in the refi space, is like, how do we create baskets of eco credits and impact assets, and uh, be able to funnel capital into places that otherwise wouldn't have a market but are still super important to invest in. I'd love
Absolutely.
to hear from Timo. I think he said he's able to hang out for the first half hour here. So if Timo, you want to jump in?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Good morning. Great to see everyone, hear everyone. Yeah, unfortunately, I have a hard stop at 9:13 for another space. But so, along the lines, Sev and Rebecca, what you're talking about of like, where the demand is. Like, obviously, we know there's demand in carbon, right? Like the market's huge for carbon, or we perceived to be huge. But also the community here, right? Everyone on the call knows that carbon is just a subset of ecosystem functionality, holistic benefits. The benefits that nature provides humans, basically. So the approach we're taking at Basin is we're trying to put every single tool together from like it kind of sounds like an oxymoron, but like real estate development for conservation and restoration. So like, call it restoration development or conservation development, which sounds odd, but that's basically what we're trying to do, is project development at scale on the parcel or the property level. And so the way we're looking at it is like forestry carbon is awesome, great, right? Like, regenerative agriculture, awesome, great. But those are kind of the shiny objects that are getting all the attention. But if you look at like, visual capitalist, that graphic from earlier this year about like ecosystems and above ground biomass versus below ground biomass, and you look at like wetlands, for example, and how much more carbon wetlands sequesters, or you look at even dry lands and like desert carbon, like how much that sequesters. And so we're taking this carbon sink approach of like, we know there's a market for carbon, and then basically baking in all these other, as people call them, co-benefits, or I like to call them core benefits of like a carbon project or ecosystem project, and we kind of keep that under the hood. Like, we know, like, if we're doing something with wetlands, or if we're doing something with cryptobiotic soils, for example, or algae, like, we're going to get all these other ecosystem core benefits that we're seeking. And I think eventually the story can change. Like, we can tell the story more around nature and natural capital and ecosystems, and living capital, natural capital, etc. I mean, the IPBS report that came out last week about nature, I mean, that's just like another like tool in our toolbox of, their report stated that the value of nature has increased 10% per year for the last 40 years. So like, talk about in terms of like framing this as an investment or a value accrual, like that's, the more science we have around that, the better. But yeah, so I mean, Basin, we have Jeff and Will and I, we're working on these different methodologies. We need to get with Becca and Sam at the, science team, Regen science team. But like one thing we're looking at is like carbon retirement portfolios, like a keep it in the ground methodology. And Becca, you said you wanted to kind of poke the bear around like non-ecological methodologies. So like that's kind of an example of like, oil and gas. Like if you have a well that has 8 years left on it and you retire that, you don't actually produce that oil and gas. You keep it in the ground. It's a carbon retirement is what the UN calls it, or the World Resources Institute calls it. But that one, or if you look at Puro Earth, which I just wanted to point out to Regen, of like Snapchat bought several thousand or maybe even 1,000,000 tons from Puro recently for the embodied or embedded carbon in like timber in buildings. So I think there's a lot of potential for these non-ecological methodologies, but then use them in conjunction, with a holistic, like Seb was saying, with like a basket or a portfolio approach of like these other outcomes we want to see are just, they're in our projects or in what we're doing, but we don't necessarily have to lead the story with that. If people want carbon, give them carbon.
Yeah, really, I'm appreciating how there's room for all of this, in the system that we're setting forth, in having a decentralized registry and having, the idea of DAOs that are making decisions about these different methodologies or, different functionality, so that Regen Registry is not the arbiter of, what is and what isn't. So the space that we're in now is certainly nature-based solutions, producing ecological credits. But the idea of where that could go is certainly yet to be seen. And I think being able to leave plenty of room on the table for all the different, not only ideas of what to measure and what to credit, but also, ideas of how to package them, how to basket them, how to put them into portfolios to meet the various and innumerable needs of the producers and the buyers. Yeah, totally. And I think that until we can reach a point where we have kind of more of the governing bodies in place for the registry, we're going to have to just to keep room for those questions. And yeah, I feel like poking the bear a bit when it comes to, we ask ourselves often about, who's defining what's regenerative, and how are we, like we use a definition, the IUCN definition for nature-based solutions, but there comes a rub where we know that you can have a carbon credit and it not have to be ecologically regenerative. And we also know that you could have an ecologically regenerative carbon credit and it not be like socially regenerative. So it's something that I was thinking about yesterday. Timo and I, maybe some others on the call, on an open team carbon A-list chat, and we're talking about kind of the cost and confidence, the quantitative and qualitative nature of like what makes a quality asset, a quality credit. And so I feel like there are a lot of different layers to be pulled back, but at the end of the day, the one of the big things that we are thinking about now on the registry side is the decision making around credit issuers and credit administrators and moving in that progressive direction. So like Timo, thinking about yesterday and like the things that kind of came up from that call yesterday, did that like kind of shift your thoughts about like how things are being packaged around like what's quality and what's not quality? Like thinking about some of the projects that you have rolling?
I think, like I've always, if you follow the leader, right, or the leaders of like, if you look at Microsoft or Stripe, like they've been using that phrase like high quality for a couple of years or at least a year now, but they use it in the terms of durability, permanence, additionality, and like even Frontier Carbon Fund won't do anything unless it's got like 100 or 1,000 year permanence, which basically excludes a lot of nature-based solutions. But I go back to the phrase, like Microsoft actually, in their last year's report, they had biodiversity as part of their high quality definition. So like, to me, high quality is like holistic. It's multiple co-benefits. But I really love the framing yesterday, Becca, around the like asset, right, or value, or portfolio. I think the more we could start, and I know some people don't like it, but like the financial terms, right, or like if you start to talk about wealth, or natural capital, inclusive wealth. I mean, Dave, you always talk about ecological assets. I mean, I proposed yesterday on Twitter that maybe we call eco credits eco assets instead, because it all of a sudden starts to accrue, like, it doesn't have to be financial value, but it's an asset to society, right? Like all these ecosystem services and functions are assets. And so I'm trying to think about more in terms of how do we tell this story as well. It's not just make money, not just make an impact, but how do we tell the story to do those two aforementioned things.
I love it. I wonder too. I think we have ICSO in the space, and I'm wondering if we've got like a Sean out there, and maybe there's some thoughts on their side too, because there's lots of docking in with all of our efforts. And also we've got Ryan on. So Ryan, I invited you up. So like some shared thoughts around the value and the storytelling components of this crediting asset work. And Will,
Becca,
yeah,
I see
yeah.
Will has his hand up. But one quick question about credit class creators or administrators. Like how, if Basin or Ogallala or Eco Labs wanted to be a credit class creator or administrator, where are you on the process? Or do we propose in the Discord, or do we propose on Commonwealth?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's one we're trying to dig into now, because it's very much like that's where we're going. So what are the steps to figure that out? And Ryan, like, please pop up here also. But the thinking is that we have grasslands as our on-chain credit class, and so like we're the current administrators for that credit class. And what we're working off of now is kind of a use case of an upcoming methodology from Climate Farmers. It's a regenerative ag methodology, and they would be, they have created a credit class for their methodology, and so they would be the credit class administrators. But then there end up being some conundrums we're working through about if the administrator is differently than the issuer, and timing and permissions as it grows. So there are some questions that we're working on. Don't quite have full answers yet, and definitely welcome input. Ryan, is there anything that you would add to that?
Yeah, I can just share a bit about what the current permissioned approach is with creating credit classes on Regen Ledger. The initial idea around having a permissioned approach was primarily focused on making sure that projects that are creating credit classes on Regen Ledger are properly migrated to an updated version of Regen Ledger when we had a more secure data structure in place for what credit classes are, projects are, and batches. And with V4 4.0, we've essentially gotten to that point where we've established a more refined data structure, and that we're one step closer to opening it up to stepping away from a permissioned approach to creating credit classes. But also in that, we also want to make sure that all of the credit classes and credit batches that are created on Regen Ledger are legitimate, and so we want to have some sort of curation functionality in place in order to ensure that people are aware of which credit classes have been essentially grouped together as legitimate credit classes. So in the current process, essentially someone needs to go through a governance process to be added to a credit class creator allow list. And that would allow them to then create credit classes on Regen Ledger. And in the future, also in relation to like projects is also a permissioned approach at the moment. So only credit class issuers, approved issuers for a given credit class, can create projects associated with that credit class. And they can transfer the admin role over to a new address, say the actual on the ground project wants to administer the project that they are represented by on chain, the issuer that created the project could then transfer the admin role over to the new address that representing the on the ground project. And that's the current model for V 4.0. And looking forward at I don't know what to call it because we got some other plans, but looking forward into the next iteration of projects, we're wanting to create a permissionless project approach, essentially where anyone can create a project on chain, and it's not created under a credit class initially. It's basically created as an empty entity with project information separate from a credit class, so that the project could then apply to multiple credit classes if they wanted to. And then the actual approval process of being accepted into a credit class, that's where the issuer or the admin of the credit class is stepping in and saying yes to this approval for the project to be included in the credit class. I'm not sure if that's entirely related, but I thought maybe that might provide a little bit of context in terms of what we're thinking and what's currently available and what's currently in place. And basically, yeah, functionality on Regen Ledger right now in terms of creating credit classes and creating projects. It's all very it's permissioned and ensuring that we're having legitimate projects on chain, legitimate credits on chain before we have some other functionality in place, such as curation and this permissionless project creation going through the approval process. So.
Ryan, and on that permissioned approach for either projects or credit class creators, is that you think Commonwealth start there or start in Discord?
Yeah. For credit class creators, we do have a document that we wrote a while back where it outlines the kind of steps that you would need to take in order, the guidelines more or less, in getting on the list of allowed credit class creators. It's in our governance repo as part of the V 2.0 eco credit signaling proposal. I believe it's where we linked to that document because that was when we were introducing the permission approach to credit class creators. And essentially what it outlines is this process of opening up a discussion on Commonwealth Forum, in providing some sort of documentation in terms of whether you're a legitimate person, like a legitimate organization that has experience approving methodologies or curating methodologies, or if you have a methodology that you've developed yourself, the research that's gone into developing that methodology. But basically starting a Commonwealth Forum discussion, sharing this documentation, and then going through the credit class, like the official on-chain proposal for getting added to the credit class creator allow list. And the alternative at the moment is going primarily through Regen Registry. Essentially, like the only credit class creator on the allow list at the moment is an address essentially representing the registry, and is managed by R&D at the moment. So we have the ability to essentially create a credit class for another project and to reassign the admin role over to that credit class, to that whoever's managing that credit class. So there is the ability for Regen Registry to kind of take the initial step and then to transfer over adminship, whether that's of a credit class or a project, over to a new address. But there is kind of this idea also around the credit class creator allow list, essentially kind of representing a registry allow list. Like if you're able to create credit classes, you're in some ways acting as a registry. So the terminology potentially could be updated in some ways to be kind of like a registry allow list. Like having an address on this allow list is essentially allowing you to act in the way a registry would by creating various credit classes. So I can share a link maybe in the comment on the Twitter space for the allow list guidelines for becoming a credit class creator allow list.
Thanks, Ryan. I want us to be able to circle back to permissionless projects. I know we've had a few questions. Will, I believe you had one a few minutes ago. Do you still want to pipe in with a thought? And then I know we have a few others too.
No, get back to me later. Y'all keep talking about this.
Okay, awesome. All right, I'm gonna pull Bati up, and we've got Ed. I see you next. See what question we got rolling if they get connected. Thanks for that download, Ryan. That's super.
Yeah, sure.
Bati, what question you got?
Thank you, Rebecca. So, pardon my foolishness in asking some naive questions because I'm new to the whole world of registry, methodology, credit class, and all these new terms. So, my question is regarding the process of setting a methodology. So how does this process look like? Is it set in stone, like you have to follow this and that steps in order to have or qualify for a methodology in a particular project? Or is there a way where methodologies can evolve out of certain practices? And these practices you can crowdsource from various communities, various farmers who are adopting new regenerative practices into their regenerative agriculture activities. So how does it look like?
Yeah, definitely, and all questions are welcome here, Bati. So no problems there. For methodology development on Regen Registry, it's we err on the side of providing guidelines instead of having all of these rules and regulations about methodology development. And so the goal is to make it really accessible to develop new methodologies, both by having a simple process and B, by having access to other open source methodologies that you could pick pieces from to build a new one. So let's say that you're interested in regenerative rice agriculture methodology, and perhaps you're looking at soil organic carbon. Well, maybe you can pull pieces of that from other methodologies, and you can build one that relates to the bioregion in which you're trying to implement projects. And so the question is less about the specific communities and more about making sure that you have the expertise that you need to build the methodology that's going to track the changes that you want to measure. So it's very much in your hands as to what the indicator is, how you're going to measure it, what tools you're going to measure it with, and what your pilot projects are. One of the things that we do at Regen Registry is try to connect you with other folks in the community, like many folks that are here that are really activated and are connected with lots of other people that know monitors and have lots of different skill sets. So we're here to support with that process. And also trying to do more just socializing ideas. So if you have a methodology idea and want to give it some room to breathe, it's a great space both here and then in Discord to socialize your ideas and to see what kind of legs it has. Does that answer your question?
It does in a way, and it's more like for me, it's more like I'm connected with some farmers also in India who are developing new practices, fully organic methods to, uh, uh, do treatment of your plants when there is some disease raging in different crops, and use organic fertilizers, and completely reduce those, industrial produced fertilizers on a mass scale to sort of, promote monoculture instead of promoting organic, new innovations, completely new mixture of fertilizers, new activities, and those practices. So I'm trying to think how could I link them to Regen and get them on board Regen registry to somehow maybe these practices could be evolve into some new methodologies that could benefit different farmers in different parts of the world.
Yeah, definitely. That sounds really innovative. I'd love to hear more about it. Find me on the Land Steward channel on Discord, and we can dig into more of those details because it definitely sounds like something worth exploring. Um, I want to bring up Ed. I know you have a question, so as soon as you get on, please share, and we'll see what Ed's got rolling this morning.
Well,
Ed,
um,
you're on.
I, I've been noticing a little bit with farmers, and especially with what's going on around in the world at the moment, is that climate has always been talked about in sort of two areas: mitigation and adaptation. And adaptation has become really strong recently because of all the problems in the world, food shortages, weather conditions. Weather conditions are been a huge issue especially this year. It seems to be getting worse every year. And so this real strong focus for farmers now is resilience. And regenerative agriculture offers both. It offers mitigation and adaptation. And I think the mitigation part is a little hard for some people to think about because it seems so overwhelming and long term. But short-term situations like the lack of food, the lack of a harvest being able to be accomplished, and those sort of things are something I think, and with hunger, and that could really draw attention. And I think it will be drawing more attention because we haven't really experienced the kind of food shortages in certain areas and stuff. I mean, even in the United States, we're having some areas that are having extreme problems getting a harvest in this year. So I just see that the adaptation part of regenerative agriculture and the interest in that might be something that we need to look a little bit more into. Thank you.
Absolutely, Ed. That really strikes me from a conversation I had earlier this week with a conservation district up in the northeastern United States, and they're talking about the various state and federal funding systems that are set up for farmers, and that the ones that are in place are not incentivizing regenerative practices or the resilience that comes from it. So let's say that you make certain changes to reduce the use of phosphorus on your field, where you're going to be rewarded for reducing that phosphorus. But what about if you have a system that doesn't even need inputs like that, like phosphorus? So thinking about even the current systems that are in place that deter people from pursuing more resilient regenerative systems. And so we're actually looking at what would a pilot look like in a conservation district that is a practice-based method approach to offering payments for regenerative practices, and the resilience that comes from it. 'Cause you're absolutely right, and we all know that this is only the beginning of those symptoms that we're seeing, and these practices are going to become all the more critical. So I really appreciate your on the ground view on that for sure. And I feel like it circles back to Seb, what you were saying early on about as we think about the level of like data that's needed, like what level of data is required to show resilience. How do we do that in a way that's not inordinately expensive? Wondering what you or others will. I know you're very much on the ground, or others in the room might have to say about how those kind of ideas intersect.
I can talk all day about how our USDA finances are not incentivizing regenerative activities and are kind of doing the reverse. And I think that's a problem in most governments. And that's why regen is necessary. It's not just carbon or climate, it is ecosystem function.
Are you seeing that with water where you are, where like around different practices for kind of resilience of water holding capacity aren't being incentivized as much?
Yes. Well, that's my issue. My problem is that water retentive landscapes aren't incentivized. Instead, if you're having problems with access to water, drill a deeper well or get a bigger pump. um, or yeah, like we waste water, and there's not a value on treating a watershed or a wetland, even like ephemeral watersheds or wetlands, as watersheds or wetlands. They're just treated as part of the pasture, treated as part of the farm, and they're pitted and drained so they can be farmed. And we're doing this for a very low value output. I mean, like putting beef on our wetlands doesn't earn $8-10 an acre, and the wetlands provide critical ecosystem function. Excuse me.
Well, what are you seeing in terms of like the cost differential there? So like if they're not making that much by putting cattle on these drained wetlands, like how much would they have to make off of a credit to maintain that as a wetland?
How much does it cost to exclude the livestock?
Yeah.
Because the wetland is found within a pasture, it's within a larger agricultural context. And so it depends, but anything's way better than nothing. And I think the ecosystem service value is likely to exceed the light intensity beef grazing value. But there's so many variables; it's very hard to predict. But what really is important is that if you pay attention to watersheds and wetlands, next time we go without rain, you're going to have more water than your neighbors. And our area is going to have more water for your efforts than without. And so I'm part of the Ogallala Life team, and we've been working on a methodology concept. And it's inspired by watersheds and wetlands banking. And so, like, there's a very small traditional regulatory market where, like, if I'm Facebook and I'm going to build a data center on a certain type of federally protected wetland, I have to buy credits from a wetlands bank that has a contract with the Army Corps of Engineers so that I can mitigate my impact on that wetland. Problem is, none of the watersheds and wetlands, well, like 99% of the watersheds and wetlands in the big, dry, semi-arid regions of the United States are not federally protected or not effectively. And there's like a whole lot of issues there. And so my thought is that we can create a voluntary marketplace that rewards the land user, whoever they are, for improving the state, the extent, and the connectivity of the watersheds and wetlands on their property, and ideally reconnect the channel to the floodplain.
I just got cold chills there. They're like thinking about the amount of land, like these floodplains historically, and how insanely impactful that would be to all of the wildlife in that region. That's so awesome. Ed, question.
Yeah, one of the fundamental little demonstrations that we use to encourage people to get into regenerative agriculture is water infiltration testing, which is very simple to do because most of our ag lands just don't infiltrate water because of compaction layers, because of crusting, because of lack of soil structure, all those sort of things. And I was on a webinar about a week ago, and a farmer said to the group, who's very active in regenerative agriculture, just a simple water infiltration test should show some real value as a metric to measure. And with the droughts we're seeing, with the level of water in Lake Mead right now and stuff, I think that's water is a big factor in all of this, and I think that's going to be increased, and that's part of water security and food security. So I think some of the simple methodologies that, demonstrators to encourage regenerative ag have been using, some of those basic tests, maybe something that need to be fit into a metric for support that people would really be interested in getting behind, because it not only brings in the issue of food, but it brings in the issue of water, and all of that benefits climate. So just add that. Thanks.
I think that's the
Can
beauty
I?
of like once like just the beauty of the kind of registry that we're setting up is that it could be composable in that way to where whatever practice you might be doing, that you could potentially like pull in like a water co-benefit, like a water holding co-benefit or something that would reflect the, that in whatever work you're doing. Yeah, Will.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say too. So this first concept that I've submitted is it really just targets specifically watersheds and wetlands, the drainages. Um, but the longer term or the bigger goal would be to build a way to value water retention and recharge in our uplands and to our aquifers. And from that perspective, it is very much about infiltration and improving infiltration. And there's a lot of very simple things that we can do to restore infiltration after compaction, for example. But there again, there's very little incentive to other than it'll improve the land and in the long term your yield because the government's paying people to do things different.
Totally. You guys are really making me want to pull out my infiltration ring and go measure some water infiltration. But I want us to have some time in the 10 minutes we have left, especially with Ryan around, is circling this back to, all right, we know that this is what we want. We want to see these types of credits. We want to see these types of practices being incentivized. And we have the scientific tools, how lean or how rigorous at our disposal, so to speak. But to me, there are these trip points at the beginning and the end of the process. At the end of the process, it's the market, it's the credit value, it's getting enough moving, towards the value of those credits. And at the beginning, it's getting a project off the ground, like the funding that it takes to assess the monitoring needs of a certain methodology, or bring a project to life. And so something that we were touching on earlier about permissionless projects and bringing them on chain before they're even running credits is one of the approaches that we're taking to try to nail that seed funding problem, that issue, that valley of death for projects. And so I'd love to take a minute with Ryan and others to talk about the kind of the early seed funding needs and what the blockchain offers us, and then what other needs people might be feeling about that from the room.
Yeah, this is something that's come up with me a lot too in conversations. Is that pre-financing of projects is really a huge obstacle for this, for making that transition over to regenerative ag, or specifically, I've been talking with like coffee farmers and like that. What is it like the switch over to regenerative practices and agroforestry takes, it comes at a cost, and there's that transitional period, and you need that pre financing, and you need like you said, the seed funding to get things off the ground. I've another with that gentleman that I talked to in Zambia. Like, he gave me pretty clear dollar amounts, like to take one lead farmer and like a group of 5 to 10 other like farmers underneath him. It's like $1,000 or so to transition over to regenerative agriculture, for like a 3 to 5 hectare plot of land. It's like he was actually able to give me specific numbers, which was awesome.
Yeah.
And so, like, how do we structure things in a way that that where's that funding come from? Because you can't just like have these incremental, funding from credits that are being created after the fact. You kind of need that pre-funding. So how does that fit in?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak a little bit to what we're looking at in terms of feature development moving forward after 4.0. The next immediate focus, slightly unrelated but related, is updating to the latest version of the Cosmos SDK, and that will add the group module, and that's potentially an opportunity for these projects to be managed more in a DAO-like structure. Essentially, the admin would be a group account. But as far as pre-financing goes, a lot of the ideas around permissionless project creation is in order to support the ability for a project to exist as an entity on chain so that that project itself can get funding, whether that's through some sort of integration with an NFT chain and platform, and having pre-funding options through like fundraising campaigns through like NFT collections, or more specifically to the eco credit module, we're looking into like forward contracts and ex-ante credits as like the next level of feature development for the eco credit module. So no longer only having credits being sold that represent previous measured positive ecological outcomes, but projects could essentially be creating these forward contracts or ex-ante credits in a way that allows them to receive pre-funding. So yeah, just a few things on the horizon. Like that's one of our main focuses right now in terms of feature development for the Regen Ledger core functionality, is to start finding better ways to support project developers that need this pre-financing. And yeah, I think there's still a lot of questions around like which ones we want to prioritize. But that is one of our main focuses, and we would love to hear from the community in terms of ideas about like what they see as a higher priority, whether it's being able to tie a fundraising campaign around NFTs to a project, or whether it's being able to essentially create forward contracts and ex-ante credits and anything along those lines. But that is one of our main focuses on future development for Regen Ledger moving forward.
My
hey
two.
guys. Ooh, sorry, go ahead, Seth.
Oh no, go ahead, Antonio. Sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in because I think what Ryan was talking about kind of ties into this refi event here in Barichara, sandwiched between Cosmoverse and DevCon. What is the last mile solution? Because I feel like it's really challenging as we're connecting online to really visualize and figure out how does this really plug in to on the ground systems. So being here in Barichara, which is it's like an intact 17th century Spanish colonial town. If anybody's ever been to Antigua in Guatemala, this is similar, but on a much smaller scale with a much more intact community. And this is tying off of the work of Joe Brewer and the Earth Regenerators, and he's been here on the ground for about the past 2 years or so. And just shout out real quick to CryptoCito. I don't know if StakeCito is the same identity, but he was on the call earlier, or he still is. Really excited. I got my Cosmoverse tickets, and I know everybody's really excited to get down to Medellin. And yeah, I just wanted to share a little bit more about kind of the idea for this refi event. And I know V4 is coming out, and what is the interest, if there would be one, for people to connect in person here in Barichara for a few days and really ground down around the new platform to see, what does this look like in real life, with feedback from community members who are doing on the ground regenerative work. So that's kind of the, excuse me? When is that? We are targeting the first week of October.
I think I'll be there.
I think I'll be there as well. So if you want to reach out, Antonio, I'd be happy to coordinate.
Very cool. Okay, great. Thank you.
Gonna be there. Gonna be there in spirit. Good share there. It'd be good to have people in.
Right on. Nice. Okay, cool. Well, that's all I wanted to add. There is a more in-depth Barichara update that Joe does on I believe 3 minutes from now. But I'll share that link online when the video gets posted. But it is exciting to see how the culture leads the regeneration and how to tie in the technology appropriately. Because I was having a conversation yesterday with a woman here who is basically leading the transformation for the local food system. And she has a really cool model for working with partners when there is lack of financial liquidity. So she works with a pineapple farmer, and he gives her pineapples. She then dehumidifies it, turns it into pineapple chips, and then those pineapple chips can either accept payment in the pineapple chips or in the currency. So there's like this really cool dynamic and modular like local economy evolving. And it's just really cool to see those inspirations that emerge from just the reality of living in a community that doesn't have the same type of financial banking resources, which can actually even be a benefit. So I think it's really good as an eye opener. So yeah, it's very exciting. I'll continue to share some more insights and vignettes, and just appreciate being here. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Antonio. In the minute or two we have left, Earth Bank, what thoughts do you have to kind of close us out?
Oh, hey, thanks. Awesome session. It's Tom here from Earth Bank. Yeah, we're really keen to support seed financing, and we've just been working on a bond finance module that could function as a forward contract. We're still in the early days, and we need to do more work on it. And we've been going through the process of the eco credit sort of peer review process ourselves. So but what we're hoping is that, yeah, this bond module could be available to projects to get some access to seed financing. We've been doing sort of structuring forward contracts just using paper-based old school techniques with large buyers, whether they're corporates or funds. And yeah, we wanted to sort of bridge some of the gaps by offering a bond module for seed financing. And we'd love to contribute in that way, so that make it easier for projects to get financing. And we're really keen to continue working with Regen Network on this, and support that and support the community. So I think there's just a huge amount of demand out there for new projects, and this sort of gap. I think this is where a lot of magic can happen, and unlock a lot of funding for all the amazing regenerative projects out there that need finance and funding, usually through a forward contract structure. So we're super keen to keep progressing that, and looking forward to keep on working with this community.
Oh, that's awesome. And a great way to close out the space. It's great to have partners like yourselves. We're going to need all tools on deck. So thanks for that, Tom. Great to have everybody, all the knowledge, all the thoughts, with the common goal here. So thanks for joining, everyone, and we will see you next time. Have a good day and a good
See you, everybody. Have a great weekend.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Becca. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thanks, everybody.